Happy 2026, everybody. It is time for Grand Prix Caersol, the first tournament of the Solitaire season. Uh, it has kind of become tradition at this point where a new season means a new fabricated anomaly aggro deck, but I'm finally off of green. I was not super happy with how the Jund build worked out last season, and instead of keeping the green and dropping the black, like I felt like Exorcist of Errors was a little lackluster, I decided that the best way to make Exorcist of Errors feel a little bit more at home in a looter deck was to just get rid of the green cards instead. So no more Huskforger Acolyte, no more turn 2 Fabricated Anomalies, and no more foreign encounters. It feels weird to be playing an anomaly deck without foreign encounter at this point, but I think it's fine. We are playing the familiar looter core that is going to be Ignited Soul, that is going to be Fabricated Anomaly. I'm still high on Calamity Cat. I refuse to be persuaded against it. I love this card too much. But we've got some very strong new contenders here. We've got Dark Sun Migrant was the big pickup from Solitaire. A 1-mana 1/1 human nomad. When it attacks, you may discard a card to give it double strike for the turn and impulse draw the top card of your library. And if you have one or fewer cards in your hand, it is a 2/1 instead of a 1/1. This card is obscene if left unchecked, and it is the kind of card that is also just really hard to justify wanting to deal with on a top-down perspective, because what do you mean I need to worry about the 1-mana 1/1? It's just a looter. It just discards a card to impulse draw. The double strike isn't real. The +1/+0 isn't real. This isn't a 2/1 double striker. I don't know what you're talking about. But no, this is a profoundly lethal threat if left unchecked. It is a card good enough that it finally gives us an excuse to play another good +1/+1 counter card besides just Anomaly, and I will stand by Calamity Cat being a good counter card. But I know that some people wouldn't agree. But fortunately, Face of Animosity is a pretty good +1/+1 counter card. You ever heard of this little card called Monstrous Rage out of Official Magic? You know, this card casually got banned in Standard. Put a monstrous roll on a creature, so it got +1/+1 and trample indefinitely, and then also gained +2/+0 until end of turn. Well, what if it didn't keep trample forever, but it did get that +1/+1 in the form of a +1/+1 counter, meaning that unlike Monstrous Rage, it stacked, so you could have multiple of the same buff on the creature rather than the roll token replacing itself. And also, it worked with +1/+1 counter synergies. Face of Animosity, +3/+1, and trample for a single mana is really good, and then +1/+1 of that buff being permanent from then on is very strong. And it is the kind of effect that when you couple that with a Dark Sun Migrant, if you are able to get to one or fewer cards in your hand and get that attack trigger to fire off and discard a card, so that way this is a double striker, then a Face of Animosity makes this hit for 10 if it goes unblocked. It is a lot of damage. It is enough damage that I am not really running burn spells in the main, at least insofar as burning the opponent or burning opposing creatures, because I think Dark Sun Migrant plus Face of Animosity has finally justified that the burn plane is just hitting the opponent with creatures. We just hit the opponent with annoying creatures and they just explode. And we're backing up Dark Sun Migrant with the familiar Calamity Cat, of course, and Ignited Soul, of course. On our 2-drop slots, we are still playing the 4 copies of Exorcist of Errors. I had my trepidations around it in the Jund build, but I do think in Black-Red, this is still just one of the best 2-mana creatures in Black. And so, you know, the competition gets really, really bad after Exorcist of Errors, I think, for the most part. And while Red does have some interesting aggressive creatures, I think the nature of where this deck has landed is that Red has some of the best contributors to the 1 and 3-drop slots on the curve, and Black absolutely reigns supreme on the 2-drop slot, especially now that we have Mercenary of Dusk, another new creature from Solitaire. 2-mana 3/2 with Menace. Whenever it enters or attacks, any number of target players each mill 2 cards. So we're almost always just targeting ourselves. This is fuel for Fabricated Anomaly. This is, if our opponent has 0 ways in their deck, and with open deck lists we can know, 0 ways in their deck to care about their graveyard, then we can fill their graveyard as well with Mercenary and kind of get some information on that. But oftentimes this is a 3-2 with Menace for 2 that is just going to be milling us for 2 each time it enters or attacks. And that is just going to be a lot of momentum for fueling Fabricated Anomaly, because one of the things that is consistently the case with Fabricated Anomaly is that it is very strong and starts to really run out of gas rapidly. And so having things that mill us to keep its ability alive are just going to consistently be good. And we're on the full 4 Spirit Realm Phoenix this time. I know, despite its nerf, I am ever higher on Spirit Realm Phoenix, and especially now that we're on Face of Animosity. This is, much like Dark Sun Migrant, would be attacking for 5 off of a Face of Animosity. And attacking for 5 off of a Face of Animosity Spirit Realm Phoenix while also dealing 1 from putting the +1/+1 counter on it is just good enough, I think. But see, there's a secret secondary reason why we want the Spirit Realm Phoenix, and it's because I wanted a good 3-drop to be particularly aggressive off of our new Unearth spell. The biggest card in Solitaire in my mind is not Dark Sun Migrant, it's not Mercenary of Dusk. The card I am most excited to play with is March of the Long Night. Black sorcery, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Each opponent loses 3 life. I think I said this during the set review, where my sentiment around this card was, would I want to play Unearth in a black-based aggro deck? Absolutely. Would I want to play Lava Spike in a black-based aggro deck? Pretty much, yeah, but I don't know if I'd want to run just a Lava Spike. Unearth by itself, probably. Lava Spike by itself, maybe not so much. If I get to staple both of those together, I don't mind paying both of their costs. I am happy to cast a Lava Spike for 2 mana if it is also an Unearth at the same time. Now, the drawback of March of the Long Night is that we do have to have a target. And that target has to still be in the graveyard when this resolves. So instant speed graveyard hate is really going to ruin our day with March of the Long Night. But this is really strong. This is turn 1 Ignited Solar Dark Sun Migrant pitches Fabricated Anomaly, pitches Fabricated Anomaly on turn 2 into a March of the Long Night on second main to get back Fabricated Anomaly. So essentially, who needs Huskforger? Huskforger doesn't attack, but this deck wants to attack. March of the Long Night deals 3 to the opponent. Who needs burn spells that kill creatures when this just deals 3 to the opponent while getting back one of our creatures that we've looted away or milled away with Mercenary of Dusk? This is such a simple inclusion to really refine the recursive core of the strategy in such a way that I am beyond thrilled about how this is all coming together. March of the Long Night is such a big deal. I'm very pleased to have my hands on it, and I'm very excited to see how it fares in these matches. And then the last card in the main that is not a land is 3 copies of Manifest Not. I don't know how this is going to fare, but I wanted to experiment with something a little funkier. And I do think that we have just enough discard effects that Manifest Not has some real potential in this strategy. So this is a 3 and a black sorcery. It costs 2 less to cast if a player discarded a card this turn. In previous iterations of this deck, I did have more ways to force the opponent to discard. I was playing Rooftop Slink. I was playing I believe Punishing Ghoul. And the big new card that I was selling me on Manifest Not, because it was a good March of the Long Night hit, and it was good with Fabricated Anomaly, in theory, was Ascended Zealot. This is a card that is absent from the deck, but I had in the Spirit Realm Phoenix slot for a little bit. 3 mana 0/3 flyer with haste. Whenever it attacks, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. The theory behind wanting to play Ascended Zealot was 0 power creatures are actually really good with Fabricated Anomaly if they matter, because this just gets a counter from Anomaly for free. This is a really reasonable thing to get off of March of the Long Night, because then you hit the opponent for 3, and then gets to attack and either hit them for another 3 or make them discard a card. But ultimately, this has the same problem as a lot of Punisher effects of the opponent just picks whatever one is best for them, and that means it's whichever option is worse for you. And because this is an unreliable discard effect, it's an unreliable way to enable Manifest Not. I ultimately decided just stick with what I know works with the Spirit Realm Phoenix. But Manifest Not costs 2 mana if we can get to discard a card in a turn, which, oh boy, Puzzle Boxes, Calamity Cats, Ignited Souls, Dark Sun Migrants now. I think we're going to be able to discard a card. And this just in that case, it's a 2 mana draw 2 that makes each opponent lose 2 life, and we gain 2 life. I have thought about running 2 mana draw 2s in this shell when they cost us life. Now having it cost the opponent life instead is very good. Because one of the things that I often find is the problem with these kinds of strategies is that while we get to look at a ton of cards, we don't get to play most of the cards that we look at. And so having something like Manifest Not turn 1 card in our hand into 2, rather than constantly replacing the cards in our hand with 1 other card, is really good. So we're backing that up by 21 lands, with 4 copies of Sanguine Palace, 4 Temple of Origins, 4 Primal Fissure, 2 Erosive Path, and then 4 Swamp, 3 Mountain. I wanted to skew a little closer to swamps than mountains, because even though our 1-drop core is very red-centric, our 2-drops are double black, 1 and a black, sometimes 1 and a black. And then our only double red instance is Spirit Realm Phoenix. I could see maybe the 4th mountain being worth running because of how key having that single red mana is on turn 1. But I think in a lot of cases, I really want my turn 1 land to be a duel. So I really want it to be Sanguine Palace, Temple of Origins, or Erosive Path. So I opted for the 2nd Erosive Path over the 4th mountain at the end of the day. The big absence from the main deck here, and from the 75 even, is Terminal Impact. This is not a strategy where I really want to be hitting a ton of lands, and so Terminal Impact has diminishing returns in that context. It's really good for 1 mana, just remove a 1 toughness creature, but I think we have enough 1 mana plays already that I'm not really looking to play Terminal Impact in those contexts. The burn spell that I am playing, now that we get to the sideboard, is Coordinated Shot. 2 mana, deal 3 to any target. We can flash it back for 3 in a red and sacrifice a creature. The value here is that Coordinated Shot is has multiple uses. Both in the sense that it is flexible in how we use it, and in the sense that we can use it multiple times. So being able to Coordinated Shot down a creature early on and then use this as reach from the graveyard is really nice. Just popping in Ignited Soul that has outlived its usefulness is really nice. In a pinch, we could just shoot the opponent for 3 twice. This can kill 2 creatures. Coordinated Shot, very reasonable removal spell. Alongside Twilight Ambush. One of the nice things about Calamity Cat, the thing I still like about Calamity Cat, is that much like is true of Fabricated Anomaly, getting our creatures' stats to be better is really valuable. And especially now that Twilight Ambush is around to be one of the core removal spells of the format, having our creatures not have power or toughness 2 or less is really important. So much like how Calamity Cat is going to help us put, Mercenary of Dusk out of range of a Twilight Ambush, or Exorcist of Errors out of range of Twilight Ambush. We also just have Twilight Ambush because the decks where this is good against probably aren't going to be playing Calamity Cat. So they're probably going to be a little more vulnerable to Twilight Ambush, because they're going to be a little more dependent on Fabricated Anomaly being how they get around Twilight Ambush. And that will be their undoing. Beyond that, we have a little bit of hand attack and graveyard hate flexibility through Absentia. This is another one of those just really low curve cards of, we just strip away something, a mana value 2 or less from our opponent's hand, or we hit a card from their graveyard and we exile that card. So it's got a little bit of an combo with Manifest Not. It doesn't make them discard. But this is just sort of the concession for there are going to be cases where there are cards in the opponent's hand we really want to get rid of. And if those cards are 2 or less, we can try and snipe them with Absentia. Otherwise, maybe we find ourselves up against a Reanimator deck where having Absentia to just strip away the reanimation target is going to be important enough. But I think in a lot of cases where we would want like a higher reaching graveyard hate card or a higher reaching hand attack spell, we probably don't need to worry about that. We'd rather our opponent have to sideboard around what we're doing. The last card in our sideboard is 3 copies of Dire Visionary, another red creature from Solitaire at 1 mana. Dire Visionary has red and tap discard to draw effect. And then whenever a player discards a card during my turn, I may pay 1 mana to make a 1/1 bird with flying that can't block. I've seen some really positive input about how good this card feels alongside Fabricated Anomaly, and I almost included it in the main. If I had, it probably would have come at the expense of Calamity Cat. But I do think that in matchups where the board is going to get pretty grindy, having this go wide mechanism built into the 75 is going to be really valuable for winning those go wide situations. And this just kind of getting to do its thing on its own is really clean. I like Dire Visionary a lot. I didn't want to build this deck without it, but I ultimately decided to have 3 copies rather than going down on an Absentia or going down one of our removal spells. The Dire Visionary, kind of the grindiest slot here. We're able to dig through a lot of our deck pretty rapidly, so the grindy card being something we have fewer of, I think just made sense because in those contexts, we're going to have more time to dig for it. So I felt confident about that. But Dire Visionary seems really cool. I imagine we'll get to board it in at least once or twice to really feel out how it plays. So yeah, this is Black-Red Looters. I'm really excited to see how this deck fares and can't wait to feel out this new format with you all. So if y'all are excited to see the tournament, of course, links as always are in the description below to all of your key resources for Revolution Custom Magic. And otherwise, I'll see you all in round 1. Bye-bye.